It's raining, it's pouring. If you hear the rain, please ignore it. Nailed it! Hey there guys, my name's Megan if you're new here, and if not, welcome back for episode 33 of Killer Weekend, where each week we'll discuss a true crime case and you guys can feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments box below. Feeling very Spice Girls today with my bunchies in. Maybe not age appropriate, but we'll move on. Like I said at the beginning of this episode, we have very stormy weather here in Scotland, so if you do hear a little pitter patter on my windowsill, please ignore it because I don't have the technical skills to remove it from the audio. If you like all things true crime, UFO, supernatural, conspiracy theory and all that good stuff in between, then please hit that subscribe button and I'll be here for you every Friday with our true crime killer weekends, and on and off every couple of Wednesdays with our weirdo Wednesdays, where I'll discuss something spooky I've heard. If you're feeling fancy like the cast from Bridgerton, then please hit that notification bell so you don't miss any upcoming episodes. So guys, what did we all make of this week's Weirdo Wednesday on La Llorona? Were we all sufficiently creeped out? I do apologise to those who have heart conditions because I wasn't really thinking about you when I was doing those jump scares. We're all alive, we're all still here to tell the tale. Good stuff. But I was telling a few of you in the comments that I was experiencing some creepy shiznit. Nothing major. I mean, the night that I finished filming, I woke up randomly at 3 AM with a really high-pitched scream coming from outside. No thank you. I'm telling myself it was a fox because I want to sleep again. There was also weird happenings when I was trying to screenshot pictures on my phone for the case. It wouldn't allow me to screenshot. Now my phone is due an upgrade, so it could also be that. But yes, tread carefully when researching the supernatural. Speaking of never sleeping again, this week's case is another awesome recommendation, so thank you so much guys. I love your recommendations, so please if you've got any, get them on in. This case for me is every female's worst nightmare, and there'll be times that I'm talking to you about this and you'll literally think I'm reading off a script from a 90s horror movie. That's how freaky this is. Next June will mark the 30th anniversary of these women's disappearances, and with still no definitive answers, I thought to myself, why don't we see what you guys think? And maybe, just maybe, we can eventually bring these women home. Tonight, everyone, we will be discussing the mysterious disappearance of the Springfield Three. The day of Saturday, the 6th of June 1992, was a happy and sunny one for the locals in Springfield, Missouri. It was graduation day, and as the kids gathered round with their disposable cameras and fluffed their perfectly back-combed hair, Suzanne Streeter, aged 19, and Stacy McCall, aged 18, were no exception. The two teens had just graduated from Kickapoo High School, and because I have the brain of a 5-year-old child, I must address the name Kickapoo. And it's literally spelled kick-a-poo. So I'm not mispronouncing it, I'm just saying how it sounds. The two high school graduates were absolutely stunning. Suzy with her bleach blonde hair and her brown eyes, and then you had Stacy who had kind of sandy blonde browny hair, and she had these amazing bluish green kind of grey eyes. My boyfriend actually has these eyes, and I like to call them dog's dinner eyes when you're not quite sure exactly what colour they are, but they're a nice mix. Gorgeous. The two girls had their own dreams and aspirations for once high school had been and gone. Stacy McCall herself had quite big dreams. She really wanted to be in TV and modelling. She did several modelling gigs for wedding shows where she would try on wedding dresses. Not only this, she also wanted to attend Missouri State University, so a smart cookie all round. Stacy was a petite 5'3", so she kind of realised that, you know, fashion modelling probably wouldn't be her jam, but she really wanted to get into TV, so she was auditioning for commercials, and her family said that she was always a little bit loopy. She just had this really funny, silly personality, and they often called her Spacey Stacy. Suzanne Streeter's goals were more rooted in family. She wanted to follow in the footsteps of her mother, Sherrill Levitt, who, by the way, was a stone cold babe as well. I mean, no shock to anyone. The gorgeous apple doesn't really fall that far from the hot tree. Except when you get those really random cases of parents who are, mediocre, and then their kids come out like Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie. But Susie's mum, Sherrill, was actually a hairdresser at the New Attitudes hair salon, and she was pretty popular as well. It was said that she had somewhere around 250 clients, and Suzy herself wanted to also be a hairdresser, so her dream was to join cosmetology school after high school. There was one aspect of Sherrill's life that Suzy didn't really want to emulate though, and that would be her taste in the old. Sherrill Levitt had grown up in Seattle, and there she had met Suzy's father, Brent Streeter. Brent wasn't really that hands-on of a dad to Suzy or Suzy's elder brother, Bart Streeter, and it was said that the relationship didn't actually last that long. In 1980, Sherrill decided that she wanted a change, and that's when she moved to Springfield, Missouri. Whilst in Springfield, she'd met a man named Don Levitt, and the two fell in love. But yes, Mama had bad taste in dudes, and he turned out to be not so great a guy either. He was in a lot of debt, and he would often take loans out in her name, and she would therefore have to pick up the financial slack for him. Because of these male figures kind of popping in and out of the kids' lives, it was said that Bart Streeter, Suzy's older brother, ended up with quite a lot of daddy and abandonment issues. Once Sherrill finally ended the marriage with Don Levitt, it was said that debt collectors would appear at her door because they couldn't find him and who was the next known kin but Sherrill. Sherrill would then have to pay off his debts, and this left her in severe financial strain. Imagine that being your job, like a debt collector. I'd be awful at that. Give me your money. No. Okay. Or don't. I don't mind. Whatever you feel like. 47-year-old Sherrill had recently put her past behind her, and the family had moved into a new home. However, Bart himself had quite a few issues. He was highly dependent on alcohol, and this would often make him quite a volatile person to be around. Sherrill had given her son an ultimatum: you either give up the devil's nectar or you're out on your butt. And Bart chose the alcohol, unfortunately. This led to a 10-year estrangement between he, his mum, and his younger sister. After 10 years of complete silence from him, the family actually soon got in touch with each other again after Bart had broken up with his long-term girlfriend. He was ready to make changes and move back home, and it was said that he was really doing well in his road to sobriety. In 1990, he moved back into the family home, and he and his younger sister Suzy even started saving up to buy an apartment together. The two moved into the apartment, and for a little while everything seemed really good. They got along really well, until unfortunately Bart started drinking again. Suzy would say that she and Bart were both quite hot-headed, and that when they got into an altercation, it often became physical. During one of their fights, Bart either pushed or hit Suzy, and this was the final straw, and the family decided to cut Bart out of their lives forever. Unfortunately for Bart, he would never again have the opportunity to reconcile with his mother and his sister. After attending Suzy's graduation that day in June, Sherrill Levitt decided to go back home. She had a little passion project she was working on repurposing an armoire. So she was working on this piece of furniture, and she decided to call one of her friends. The phone call was normal, and Sherrill did not seem distressed. While this was all going on, Suzy and her friend Stacy, and also a mutual friend named Janelle, decided to head off to a couple of house parties. The plan was that the three girls were going to head off to separate parties, and then eventually all meet up at a hotel only 45 minutes away in Branson. Stacy's mother, Janice, later said that she wasn't really happy about the girls staying at this motel that night. One, it was quite far away, and two, she didn't really like the idea of the girls partying and then driving. The girls had the opportunity to have a bit more of a PG night. The high school had offered to do a lock-in, a sober lock-in. Can't really imagine many of the graduates going for that. And within this lock-in, it would be like a high school sleepover, and they wouldn't be allowed out until the next morning at 8 AM. Shockingly enough, the teens didn't really want to have a teetotal sleepover on the night of their graduation, and they headed off into the night to their respective parties. Whilst attending one of these parties, Stacy McCall made a phone call to her mother at around 10 PM to let her know that she would not be staying at the motel anymore and that they would be going to Janelle's house. The group had quite a big plan for the next day. They had all agreed to go to the Whitewater Water Park in Branson, which literally would only be about a 45-minute drive away for them. This is why they were thinking of staying at a motel nearby. This day out was supposed to kick off their summer of fun and freedom, but unfortunately neither Stacy, McCall or Suzanne Streeter would ever make it to the water park that day. When Suzy, Janelle and Stacy all arrived back at Janelle's house, they noticed that the house was a lot more crowded than they thought it was going to be. You see, Janelle had quite a lot of family members who had travelled to Missouri solely for her graduation, so therefore they were all going to be staying over. There was somewhere for the two girls to sleep on the floor in the living room, but they felt like it was a little bit crowded, so Suzy suggested that the two girls go and stay at her home. Stacy agreed to stay at Suzy's, and the two girls headed off in their separate cars to make the short drive there. Don't drink and drive, kids. It's believed that both the girls did arrive that night at 1717 East Delmar Street and that they safely made it inside. There was washcloths present, which suggested that both girls had had time to take off their makeup and get ready for bed. The clothes that were missing from the girls also suggested they had time to make it into their sleepwear. Susie's mum had recently bought Suzy as a graduation gift a waterbed, which is such a 90s gift. Like these days for graduation gifts, it's a Louis Vuitton handbag and a nice watch, but no, back then we wanted a mattress that was filled with water and a phone you could see through. How cool were those phones though? I really want to get one again, but we don't have a landline number, so I'm not sure how that would work. So like we said, we know the girls arrived home, but exactly what happened after that is still a complete mystery. The next day, June 7th, 1992, Janelle Kirby, the girl's friend, got up, got ready for the water park and awaited her friend's arrival. Suzy and Stacy had agreed that they would be at Janelle's house for a certain time that morning so they could all make the drive to Whitewater Water Park, but they never arrived. Janelle started kind of thinking, oh, maybe they're running late, but as time grew on, she grew a little bit annoyed. After making several phone calls to Suzy's house, she decided to go down to the house and check for herself where they are. I absolutely love her energy as well. She's like, I will have my time on the lazy river. At around 10ish, Janelle arrived at the Streeter home, and yeah, everything seemed kind of normal except for a little bit of broken glass on the porch. It actually come from the family's porch light. Now the light itself wasn't broken, it was just the glass globe around it. So already a little bit strange. Often not mentioned as well is the fact that another friend of Suzy's had turned up to her home that day, and her name was Nigel. Nigel herself said that there was something odd in the way that Suzy's car was parked. She said that Suzy would never have parked it at that angle or on that side of the driveway, so already alarm bells were ringing for her friends. When Janelle Kirby and her boyfriend Mike Henson realise that all three cars are in the driveway, they think, well, they must be home. So they tap the door and no answer. After a couple of minutes, they try the door handle and the door is open. Janelle does think this is a little bit strange, but she thinks maybe they're getting ready and Sherrill has already been up and out. She enters the home and right away sees a few things that are a little bit weird. The TV is on, but it's actually just playing static, so already creepy vibes. She also notices that the three women's purses are piled in a neatly orderly fashion, with all of them sitting side by side. Not really thinking much about it, Janelle had asked her boyfriend Mike to sweep up the broken glass. After walking around the home, Janelle does notice that the girls are clearly not in the house. However, their little Yorkshire Terrier Cinnamon is seeming quite agitated. It was cowering and lunging in quite an aggressive fashion and barking at Janelle. She said this was really odd for the little dog. As they look around the home, they notice that some of the beds appear slept in, as if the women came home, went to bed, got up the next morning. Nothing really seems out of place or out of order. The idea that maybe Sherrill gave the girls a lift to the water park themselves is quickly ruled out as well, because all three of the cars are there. Not only this, Suzy and Stacy's bathing suits are sitting in a neatly folded pile ready to go for the next day. Janelle, Mike and Nigel all kind of chalk it up to the fact that maybe they've left in a hurry because of a family emergency, or maybe something came up and they forgot forgot about the water park. I mean, they were all up pretty late, so maybe they just didn't think it was happening still. They decide to leave the home and try and contact them again later that day. Remember, this is the 90s. We didn't have mobiles, we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have iWatches, so there was really no other way they could contact them if they weren't home. Just as Janelle and Mike make their way towards the door to leave, the house phone begins to ring. As the high shrill ring rings out, Janelle thinks, I might as well answer it in case it's someone calling about an emergency or about the girl's whereabouts. Janelle picks up the phone and lifts the receiver to her ear, and what she hears next is terrifying. It's a man breathing down the phone, making lewd and sexual comments to 19-year-old Janelle. Janelle's absolutely horrified by what the man says, and she hangs up the phone. Right away, as quickly as she hangs up, he phones right back again and starts saying similar things. Janelle's disgusted and yet again hangs up the phone, but she can't help but shake the feeling that this might be connected. What the man said to Janelle on that phone call has never actually been released to the public, but it is said that Janelle felt like perhaps someone was watching them and knew that they were in the home. Sufficiently creeped out at this point, Janelle and Mike and Nigel decide to leave the home, but none of them think anything is significant enough to bother police with. I'm not gonna say nothing. Later in the afternoon, Stacy's mum Janice is a little bit miffed. She's not heard from her daughter, and usually she would call her kind of when she was about to leave somewhere, so she was expecting a phone call from her that morning. So she tries to get Susie's home phone number, and because it's a new address, she does struggle for a little bit to find it. She eventually gets the number and she calls it a few times, to no avail. No one's home. She then decides to go to Susie's house and check what's happening for herself. When she arrives at Susie's home, there are several others who have arrived because Janelle has phoned round to ask if anyone knows where they are. Janice arrives at 1717 East Delmar Street to find yet again the door is still open, and when she walks in, she realises the dog's distressed and that something's just not right. There was $900 in Sherrill's purse that was going to be deposited at the bank that day, and that's very odd that she would just leave that lying around the house with the front door unlocked. Sherrill was also a chain smoker. She loved her ciggies, and her cigarettes were still neatly packed away in her handbag. Not only this, her daughter Stacy suffered from quite bad chronic migraines, which same, but Stacy's migraine medication was still in her handbag. She would never leave home without it. As Janice is trying to make sense of everything that she's seeing, the little dog Cinnamon is yapping away. If it could tell her what happened, it would. Janice didn't call police right away. She decided to wait a little while to see if the women would arrive home eventually. And like I said, during this time, there was several other people, concerned family and friends, coming in and out of the home. Now, this is where it gets a little bit irritating. During this time, they weren't all kind of out searching and doing their bit for the women. They decided that the best way they could help would be to scrub that crime scene clean. Some of them were taking the trash out, some of them were cleaning countertops, some of them were even hoovering and washing the floors. I must say it loud enough for you in the back. You are not being helpful. Put the Dyson down and go out in your car and drive around and look for them. That's how you can be helpful. I feel like this is a theme with 1990s cases, and it is really annoying. I mean, in all fairness, CSI wasn't a thing yet, but come on. So many potential clues were completely destroyed by people's interference, such as the glass that had been swept up by Janelle's boyfriend Mike when he thought he was just doing a good thing. He put the glass into a trash can across the road, and that was soon lifted, gone forever. There's also the potential of blood evidence, of DNA, of fingerprints that could have been in and around the home that was completely wiped away when people started cleaning. Lastly, and probably the most infuriating part of this case, so just buckle up kids, I need some milk for this one. Later that evening, when the women didn't arrive back home, Janice then decided that was the time to call the police. When she was calling the police, she heard a message on the answering machine that was eerie and eerily similar to the prank call that they had heard earlier that morning. But through stupidity, Janice deleted that message, and she couldn't even remember anything that the caller had said on it. Police feel like this message was connected and crucial to the girl's disappearance, and unfortunately it's gone forever. Weirdly enough though, the police said that they felt like the lewd phone call earlier that morning and then the separate phone message weren't connected. They said that they felt like that was completely unrelated, which I'm not really sure who's making prank phone calls at 10 AM of a lewd nature. Just wake up and start your day. Hey there, what you wearing? Now I was thinking to myself whilst I was researching, I'm sure Stacy's mum feels awful about deleting the message, but no, she doesn't really take responsibility for it. There's a documentary in which she's being interviewed. She's like, I don't know, somehow it got deleted. It was you. It wasn't all bad though. I mean, the family and friends had kind of, set the case back a little bit, but they were really good in handing out flyers. In fact, it was said that Stacy's mum Janice dedicated all of her time to handing out flyers across the state of Missouri for her missing daughter. She went into every bar, every restaurant, and made sure that people took the time to take a look at the missing women. Because of her dedication, several tips did come into the local police department, but unfortunately none of those would bring any resolution. One of the tips that was called into local police was the fact that a waitress from Susie's favourite restaurant said that she had seen the women that night. In fact, between the hours of 1 AM and 3 AM, she was certain that Sherrill, Stacy and Suzy had all been sitting in her section at the local diner. However, when police interviewed other staff, other patrons from that night, none of them could agree on this story. Were they there? What were they doing there, having breakfast at 2-3 AM? Another neighbour in Springfield, only 1 mile away from the Streeter home, said that she saw something pretty disturbing. She was out on her porch at around 6:30 AM on the morning of June the 7th when she saw a green silver van pull itself into the driveway next door. She said that the driver backed into the driveway and she claimed to hear a male voice coming from the back of the van saying, "Now back up and don't do anything stupid." The driver of this vehicle, she says it was Suzanne Streeter. Investigators actually thought this was quite a possible lead because the neighbour had actually mentioned a birthmark that Suzy had on her face that wasn't present in any of the missing persons posters. Not only this, she described the van to a T. She said it was a 1960 to 1970 Dodge panel van. Now, obviously with eyewitness testimonies, everyone's always going to have their little bit of opinion to put in there, and I do find it a wee bit strange that with the engine running, she was still able to hear this man talk and knew that his voice was coming from in the back of the car. Unless all of the windows were down, which I would think in a kidnapping, would you have all of the windows down so that your victims could potentially escape or cry out for help to a motorist nearby? I don't really know, and I don't think that I could personally hear someone if all of the windows are up, the engine was on, and they weren't right next to me either. But I guess we'll never know. Police took it quite seriously. Seriously enough, in fact, that they actually got their own van and painted it the exact same colour that the witness had said it was and placed it outside the police station, asking people to call in any tips relating to the van that looked like this. Police do make quite a big effort. Obviously it's very concerning. These 3 women have clearly been taken in some way, and they search on foot, they search local lakes, local bodies of water, to no avail. The FBI do eventually get involved because it's quite a high profile case. There's no physical evidence to really go off of in this case, and that's one of the most infuriating things. Probably had it happened now, there would have been more of a digital footprint. For example, cell phone records, CCTV. These are things that we just didn't have in the 90s, and this has definitely affected the case. Now, we'll get into the suspects of this case and persons of interest, and you guys can let me know what you think. What are your theories? Early in the investigation, the names Dusty Rekla and his best friend Michael were mentioned to law enforcement. I just can't take the name Dusty seriously after you've watched Just Friends. Come on, Dusty! If you've not seen that movie, you need to go watch it right now. Not right now, maybe later, after this episode, because it is comedy gold. Dusty and Michael had quite a troubled past with Suzy and her mother. You see, recently Dusty and Michael had been arrested for grave robbing, essentially. They had broken into a local mausoleum in a graveyard and actually stole gold teeth out of corpses. If that doesn't say serial killer, I don't know what does. Suzy was actually dating Dusty at the time, and she said that this was the final straw for her. You know, he's weird and she didn't want to be a part of that, so she decided to split up with him. He was also quite dark. It was said that he was into satanic rituals and the 666. The two boys were eventually caught because a pawn shop owner had called authorities when they were sold a set of gold teeth. I always think to myself, someone who works in a pawn shop must just have the oddest job ever. In the front, I've got a bracelet of a dead sorority girl, but I might even have a signed photo of Tim Curry in the back. Love it. Like any normal human being, Suzy decided to dump Dusty's ass for this, and she actually decided that she would testify against him in court. The court date was set for September, the court date that never came for Suzy. But you know what they say, snitches get stitches, and Dusty and Michael felt some type of way. They felt really betrayed by Suzy, and they made it known to a lot of people in town that they weren't happy with her. When Michael was interviewed regarding the women's disappearance, he even said, "I wish those 3 bitches were dead." The alibi that was given by Michael and Dusty didn't really quite add up either. They said they were at a friend's rock concert and then went to an after party afterwards, but the only people who could corroborate their story was each other. No one else kind of remembered seeing them there conveniently, so there's that. Even though neither man has ever been brought up on charges for the missing women, they are still classed as persons of interest. Another popular suspect for quite some time was Suzy's brother, Sherrill's son, Bart Streeter. Now, like we said, Bart was extremely troubled. He had problems with alcoholism and violence, and it was said that he was highly resentful of the close relationship that Suzy shared with her mother. He often blamed his mother for bringing the wrong kind of people into his life, men who had drinking problems, gambling problems, and addictions themselves. But Bart had quite a solid alibi. A neighbour and his girlfriend at the time had both said that he was drunk in his own home. We know these don't mean much, but he also passed a polygraph test, and investigators say he has been heavily involved in trying to find his mother and sister. In fact, it's said that he's felt an immense amount of guilt over the fact that if they had been close at the time, he may have been in and out of the house, and this person wouldn't have felt like the women were such an easy target. Unfortunately, Bart's life has still been plagued by his alcoholism, and in 2019 he was even arrested with public intoxication and attempted false imprisonment. It was said that he entered a nail salon in which he then tried to claim that he was a 15-year-old patron's grandfather and that she was to come with him right now. The girl was a complete stranger to Bart and she had no idea who he was. His representation would later say that these claims were majorly exaggerated by witnesses and that he only wandered in a little bit tipsy and asked if the girl was the owner's granddaughter. He wasn't trying to abduct anyone. He's never been charged in any involvement with the disappearance of his mother and sister, and he is not considered a suspect. Last, but certainly not least bizarre, is Robert Craig Cox. Now, Robert Craig Cox was actually called in via a tip made by the sister of Sharon Zellers. Sharon Zellers was a 19-year-old Walt Disney World worker who had disappeared on her way home on the 30th of December 1978. Sharon never arrived home and her abandoned car was found 4 days later. On the day of her disappearance, Robert, who was actually vacationing in Florida with his parents at the time, Space Mountain by day, serial killer by night. To be fair, what grown-ass man goes to Disney World with his parents? On the night of the 30th, Robert arrived back at his hotel very late, and it was said that he was covered in blood. He'd entered his mother and father's hotel room, and it had appeared that his tongue had half been clean bitten off. The hospital staff don't really believe his claim that he bit his own tongue because they can actually see the tear and teeth impressions going the other way. On the 4th of January 1978, only 5 days after being noted as missing, unfortunately Sharon's body would then be found 340 feet away from the Days Inn where Robert and his parents were staying. Due to DNA being in Pampers at that point, there was no real evidence to hold Robert and he was set free. So you have this monster walking the street. That case was actually a real mess. I will actually cover that at some point too because it's really interesting. Robert would then go on to live his life as a member of the US military, even winning Soldier of the Year. Now I'm not going to say anything about the links between the US military and murderers, but you know what I'm saying. This man was free to terrorise whoever he wanted on the streets, and he would actually later go on to assault and kidnap 2 other women. In 1998, he was finally arrested and charged with the murder of Sharon Zellers. However, after being sentenced to death only 1 year later, he was acquitted of these charges due to lack of evidence. And once again, he was out there terrifying women. After his release, Robert kind of bounced around from friend's house to friend's house before finally settling in 1992 back with his mummy and daddy in none other than Springfield, Missouri. In fact, he even got a job working at the same car dealership that Stacy McCall's father Stu worked at, where Stacy would frequently bring him homemade lunches. Is it possible gorgeous young Stacy caught his eye and she wasn't interested? But he sure was. Because of his closeness to the case and his criminal history, Cox was actually even interviewed at the time of the disappearances, but his girlfriend gave him a solid alibi. She said they had attended church and they had stayed together the rest of the evening. She would later confess that that was all a bunch of shiitake and she'd made the entire thing up simply because he had asked her to. Ladies, come on. There's plenty of sane out there for you to get. You don't need to be lying for them. I'm just putting this out right now to my fiance if you're watching. I will sing like a canary if that is you. You get thrown under the bus. I'm not lying for anybody. Don't do the crime if you can't do the time, boys. Because of this false alibi, Robert then completely slipped through detectives' hands. But that wasn't the last we would hear of Robert Cox. No. Because in 1995, he was actually charged with armed robbery for holding a firearm to a 12-year-old girl's head. He's now been arrested and sentenced to life in prison. Whilst in prison, because of the tips that had been called in about him by Sharon's sister, who still to this day fights for justice for her sister, and he actually said to a television interviewer that he knows for a fact the women are dead. He just knows. Funny that. He also said he won't elaborate on what he means by this until his elderly mother has passed away. I mean, I'm pretty sure she knows what kind of monster she bred at this point, but okay. To be fair though, whenever you hear about killers making these kind of statements like, I'll confess when such and such, it's never really about the victims' families or about doing the right thing. It's so they can control the narrative because they enjoy watching the victims' families suffer. It's almost like they're doing it all over again. And definitely I think he's one of these monsters that gets off on it. To local police, Robert Craig Cox is their prime suspect, and they're hoping to one day get a confession and a burial site. But regarding the burial site, there is several other theories, and one of them might shock you. Because of the immaculate crime scene and the military precision in the way it was handled, several people do believe around the area that it could be possibly part of a sex trafficking ring. And these things aren't unheard of. You hear about teams of people going in and taking young girls out of their homes. Up to 50,000 women and children are forced into sex trafficking every year in the USA. And this case might not be an exception, because upon realising that there's no man present and there's not a lot of males going in and out of the home, this could have made Suzy and her mother a prime target. And perhaps Stacy being in the home that night was essentially just a really twisted bonus for these people. It's also possible that Stacy was the target and maybe it was just where she laid her head that night they were going to go. But it does seem seem very organised, the fact that not one single trace of evidence was left. But we also need to consider that everyone was cleaning up. Is it possible there was evidence left and it just got swept away? The crime scene itself would suggest that the women were interrupted whilst either getting ready for bed or whilst actually in bed. There was several things that would suggest that Sherrill was in her bedroom when they were ambushed, essentially. There was a book that she was reading that was laying on her bed. There was also a couple of blinds pulled back in Susie's bedroom, which suggested that she had heard something outside and lifted the two blinds in the fold to see if someone was out there. Several of the locals in Springfield expressed their fear about talking to local media about this case, as many of them have a theory of police involvement. This could explain why the crime scene was so pristine, because who knows crime scenes better than law enforcement themselves. Also, we have the mysterious whodunit with the erasing of the message on the phone. Was it Stacy's mum Janice that deleted that message? She sure doesn't think that she deleted it. Is it possible it could have been deleted on purpose? When Stacy's mum Janice phoned police to report her daughter missing, they actually didn't seem too urgent about it. In fact, they told her that it could wait the night and she was just to come in the next morning to the station. Also, whoever she spoke to on the phone asked if she could source her daughter's dental records. Why would you need those? Why? Her daughter hadn't even been missing for 24 hours and they were saying sit back and relax till morning, but also we think she might be dead. Is it possible that the officer on the other end of the phone knew something that Janice didn't? A recent episode of True Crime Daily showed Springfield local Kathy Baird saying that she felt like there was something suspicious going on. The interview itself is very bizarre, and when Kathy's questioned on who she thinks may be responsible for this or who she thinks was the target of this crime, she merely says that it wasn't Stacy who was the target, insinuating that Robert Craig Cox was not the killer. The interviewer pushes Kathy and she refuses to speak any further on it, even angering the producer in the background enough to say, why are you having this interview if you're not going to be honest with us? And then she kind of snaps and says that she has to live here and there's certain things she doesn't feel safe to say. She also claims that she's been boxed in at the end of her own driveway and threatened against investigating this case. Also, something that irritates people when looking into this case is the lack of movement in the last 10 years. Over 10 years ago now, Kathy Baird was informed that someone believed that the bodies were buried under a local hospital. She was informed that the bodies may be laying just feet beneath the car park of the Cox South Hospital in Springfield. You didn't mishear me, it's called Cox Hospital, the same surname as Robert Craig Cox. Conspiracy theory! The hospital itself was actually under construction at the time of the disappearance, and it is possible that the bodies may have been buried in a shallow grave before the concrete was poured in. Now, police have said that they believe the bodies would have been unearthed in the digging process before the concrete was placed there, but they said it is a possibility. A mechanical engineer hired by Kathy Baird even went in with ground penetrating radar, and he said that he found 3 anomalies. He said they were consistent with what he has found before in a burial site. But even after this evidence and 10 years worth of people trying to get the site excavated, police are still adamant that they will not dig up the site. There's actually a petition to have the site excavated, and I'll pop that in the description box below. Even just to rule it out, what harm can it do? The most recent development in this case was in 2003 when investigators received a tip on the south of Cassville on farmland. It was said that items had been buried out there. Investigators did excavate the area and only 2 small pieces of evidence were found. A piece of a green vehicle which matched the description of the vehicle the neighbour had seen that morning, and also what they perceived to be blood evidence. However, because of the condition the items were left in, the results came back as inconclusive. Sherrill Levitt's sister, Susie's aunt, has actually had her family members declared as legally dead. Obviously, she still hopes and prays that they are found, but that looks less and less likely as the years go on. But Stacy McCall's mother can't let go. She's still adamant that her daughter will come home. She still has that hope because really none of the evidence suggests anything otherwise. Almost 30 years ago, Janice McCall walked into a restaurant called Coyotes and handed the owner a flyer with her daughter's picture on it. That same day, the owner promised the mother that he would not take the flyer down until the women had returned home. It still hangs there today, aged and tattered in 2021, a constant reminder of the beautiful Springfield 3. I hope you guys liked this week's episode. Please let me know what you guys think, and yeah, let's keep this case out there. Please like, please share, everything you can. We need to bring the girls home, and one day I actually do believe there is a possibility with the advancement in DNA testing and everything amazing that's going on with that right now. Hopefully we can get some crucial pieces of evidence found. If it's your first time here and you've lasted this whole episode without being irritated by me, then please hit that subscribe button. Feel free to follow me, not to the shops because that's not okay, on Instagram at Megan True Crime. I also have a TikTok page, it's very PG, no bum shaking, at megan.truecrime. Remember guys, you're all stunning inside and out. I love you so much. So please remember to lock your doors, don't talk to strangers, and always change up your routine. Keep them guessing. No one likes a predictable party. See ya! My hands are a different colour from my face.